This episode of the EPS podcast has us dissecting a funny little cartoon postcard from the early 20th century. Join us. Everything is a Primary Source is now on Teachers Pay Teachers with ready-to-use lesson plans, activities, and assessments incorporating, you guessed it, primary sources of everyday life from the last 200 years. With several free resources and everything else $5 or less, you'll be able to enhance your social studies curriculum with deep-cut documents of the past quickly and affordably. Look up Everything is a Primary Source on Teachers Pay Teachers to browse the collection. Welcome to the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, the show where we navigate history through popular culture. I'm your host, Eric Salmonson. I'm a social studies teacher, historian, and pop culture enthusiast. Each episode, I sit down with everyday people to discuss the media, objects, places, and events that shape us and reveal what they say about the past, as well as who we are now. The Everything is a Primary Source podcast is, therefore, your history, my history, our history through popular culture. So Jonathon Ahl is the Education Programs Manager at the Rokeby?
Yes, the Rokeby Museum in Ferrisburgh, Vermont. We are primarily an Underground Railroad museum, but the family that lived on these grounds lived here for 4 generations, so there are quite a few stories we could tell about them.
And I'm hoping to soon. We were talking beforehand that we recorded that this would be a great opportunity to highlight one of your favorite letters. And it's correspondence, right? I mean, we're talking about using the mail to get information around. And what you selected for my table today would also fit into that same category because we are looking at a postcard from 1908. And let's describe it to the listening audience if we could. So what are we looking at?
So we are looking at a cartoon of a duck with a rather large bill. And the duck is not too anthropomorphic. He does look like a duck, but he does have a cigar in his mouth. He's got a cane tucked under his wing. Yeah. Yep. A little bowler hat and some rather intelligent-looking glasses. He is calmly approaching a stream, and we have a caption here that says, "I shall soon be strictly, in it." In it being in quotation marks. So this is, it really caught my eye both because of the drawing, which is, just sort of kind of funny on its face, but also because it is quite a mystery to me as to what the intended joke is here, because clearly it's a joke, but it's a little obscure, I think, to a modern eye.
So the way this podcast works is I choose a question from my list of primary source analysis forms like I use in my classroom. And the one that comes to mind, I think that we're trying to crack the code of, is what behaviors and idea are being conveyed here. And the postcard comes with those words on it, but then the person sending the postcard has added some more words.
Yes, as you typically do in postcards, but where you would expect a postcard to mainly be information about themselves or a trip, he appears to be adding to the joke here. Underneath, in it, he has said, "dirt instead of water." And he has signed that at the bottom. It looks like he signed less. If I'm assuming that's a name, it looks like Less.
Yeah.
Now, that comment has not cleared up the original joke. If anything, it's made it more obscure to me.
Right.
But to your question about what behavior or idea is coming across, clearly it's meant to be humorous. Whether this is a joke that, would be apparent to anybody who is not the sender is a little confusing. So I would actually say, before I answer that question, flip it over and take a look and see if we can divine anything from the back here. So I'll just describe the back to you. It's a postcard that obviously has been stamped, so it was sent through the mail. Mm-hmm. We see that it's a little faded, but the stamp does read Seattle and Point, or Post, perhaps. And the date is, as you said, August 24th, 1908. Not too much to read into there. It's being sent to a Mrs. L.A. Shaw, 580 East Doors in Portland, Oregon.
So not terribly far away. Seattle to Portland
Right.
it's not cross country. It's the same region.
Also confusing as well because, I mean, if there's one thing you know about, or that I know about, sort of that Pacific Northwest area, is that isn't it quite rainy up there? So I don't know. So dirt instead of water, if that is dirt, if we haven't misread that as well, because, we're always looking at people's handwriting here. Well, it hasn't made it any clearer to me.
Right.
I don't know if it's made it any clearer to you, Eric.
The only thing I'm kind of like connecting right now is I know that the Oregon State, their college football team is the Ducks.
Okay.
And so, they must play either in or near Portland or maybe Salem, the capital city. And there might be some connection there, like an inside joke, but it's abnormal to have no writing on the back of this. Now, both sides of this postcard have the exact same texture of paper. We're mostly familiar in the modern era so both sides are matte and you can write on it. Most postcards that we're familiar with, if they even still exist in the modern era, have a glossy side where you don't really alter it at all. You just kind of use whatever their message they're sending on. It could be just like greetings from Vermont, or it could be something more specific of like the museum you went to. But here it's writable, and so I'm assuming there's some kind of inside joke here. But even the joke itself, the one that comes pre-made on the postcard, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It reminds me of another time. I remember browsing in an antique store and found a postcard from around the same era. It's the turn of the 20th century. And it was a photograph of a man and a woman. And he's like the man's like talking smooth to the lady. And he says in it, you say you look fine in a bathing suit, but I'm from Missouri. I'm like, what? It didn't make any sense to me. I showed it to my dad, and he's like, oh, because it's a show me state. Oh, okay. So apparently everybody back then, I don't think of, I guess the names of states sometimes come up every now and then. Like in New Hampshire, we talk about the Granite State all the time. And, New Jersey, where you're from, is the Garden State and the Green Mountain State, things like that. But the show me state, even that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, show me what? What are you talking about? So this might be one of those kinds of things that's regional culture, regional humor that somebody in the Pacific Northwest might get. Maybe that's a Seattle, Oregon type thing, or a Washington, Oregon type thing of like, I'll soon be in it. Ha ha ha.
Well, I think if I were to take a guess, I think we're also just dealing with not just regional humor, but maybe just simply archaic phrases that are not being said anymore. I think we can kind of safely answer the question you posed to me that this is obviously showcasing familiarity, friendliness, seems to be a kind of playfulness, whether this was meant to inform in any way, whether in it meant, was meant to be a sense of where he was going or what he was doing, is a bit lost to us. But I would like to take a moment and say, because working at Rokeby Museum, we have quite a large group of artifacts and letters and cartoons even that were made by the Robinsons that equally seem kind of confusing to us. So I could, I'd tell you how I might approach this had this been something I came across in our collections. When I was describing the illustration, one thing I didn't mention is a bit of text on the bottom. It says copyright 1907 P. Gordon, and then it looks like a GES. I think the first thing I would do is dig into that, see if that is a well-known cartoonist, see if I could see some of his other work. Yeah. Perhaps this duck is a character of his, and that might help figure out a bit what the intention is here. I might also look, I might Google the phrase, I shall soon be strictly in it, and see if maybe that was something in the turn of the century that was a little more well-known, something that people would have commonly said to one another. Unfortunately, though, there is always a bit of a wall you hit when you try to dig into these things. So I couldn't tell you if that would get me to a satisfying answer on this. And so that's why I would also say that, when you look at these sorts of artifacts, it's, of course, always good to get concrete answers, to get sort of a hard meaning out of it. But I don't want to make it sound like this is useless if you can't dig deeper into it, because as we just said, it's very important as something that somebody not only chose to buy and send, but to alter, to put their own little spin on it, sort of a lasting artifact of their personal humor and personality as well.
I'm going to give credit where credit's due. There's a gentleman that I visited his archives and was a bit of inspiration for my stuff. His name is David Bieber. And he refers to this kind of thing and all of these things that I have as cultural debris. That it's kind of the leftovers from other larger movements plowing through the society. And obviously, whatever character this is, if it's a character, and the cartoonist never really reached to the status of a... was it Thomas Nast, the cartoonist from the 19th century? Everybody knows his cartoons.
Yes.
Because they were widely distributed in his own time period. He's not a Charles Schulz, right? He's not any of these people that came about later in the 20th century. This, therefore, is a piece of debris from an era just before we develop in this country, and arguably globally, or at least in the Western world, a uniculture that everybody's in on the joke. And that really takes stride after the First World War, which this is about 10 years before that, where the same movies, the same magazines, the same newspapers are even just read by everybody, watched by everybody. The same music's listened to everybody. Recorded sound, recorded pictures. All of this becomes so that everybody in the nation, whether they're in Portland, Oregon or Portland, Maine, is understanding the same stuff. And so this might be one of the last pieces. If we do digging, we could be totally wrong about this. Maybe it was, everybody was like, oh yeah, that's Gimbals the Duck from, everyone knows him. But it was, my guess is that it was more of a, considering this went from one part of the Pacific Northwest to another part of the Pacific Northwest, it might have been like a regional thing. Could
be, yes. And part of me also thinks, again, what I just described to you, I'll do it again, the costume, we could call it, of the duck, cane, cigar, these sort of very neat-looking spectacles and a bowler cap. I mean, that speaks to a social status, obviously, and it could even potentially be meant to be satirizing either a type of person or a specific person. This could be sort of a political joke as well. Or we could be overthinking it, and it's just simply a silly duck that is about to walk into a stream. It sort of is one of those things that when you just pick it up, your first impression is sort of unknowable, and that's why you just sort of go over it with a fine-tooth comb, and you sort of see what you take away from it, because sometimes you can dig deeper and there just won't be anything else to find. And so those first impressions can be very important.
Yeah. It would be, like you said, I think our next step would be to look up the artist and line up his other work. Maybe comes from a series of postcards. There might be several of these little vignettes. And this is, this might be like, I mentioned Charles Schulz before, this might be like Charlie Brown trying to kick a football and Lucy pulling it. Everyone recognizes that image. You could put that on a greeting card. You could put that on a postcard. People would be like, oh yeah, I remember that from the Thanksgiving episode, or every episode of that show or the comic strip. But it could also just be the most obscure thing even in its era.
Right.
It might not have actually been there. But one idea I just had is that I'm sure the copyright in this thing is over. So maybe you and I can make our own comics. We could bring this character back to life. Give him a name and give him a whole new life of going, I shall soon be strictly
in it. Yes. Dirt instead of water. No credit to you, Les. Right. I don't see a copyright next to your name.
No, I didn't. And but it's very English looking, isn't it? Like a proper gentleman.
I almost think because, we're here in my museum's in Vermont. Obviously, you're in New Hampshire. I almost see this guy as seeming very New England in his dress, sort of very hoity-toity, very clean. I mean, he's also got his eyes closed, and I feel like in most cartoon symbology, eyes closed is like sort of the universal sign of arrogance.
Yep.
sort of like walking forward with your eyes closed is like...
I think you're onto something, and I would go maybe one step further and maybe say this could be still regionalism, but showing contempt or making fun of other parts of the country. So maybe this is a character from the East, and in the far West, they kind of look at Easterners as being... But then I also think about Fraser Crane, who is from Seattle, Washington, and a fictional character. Him and his brother Niles seem to be of the most intellectual crowds and sophistication, and he might very well be represented here. I mean, that in 1908, that was still a new part of the country. That was still under... The timber industry was really taking off, Seattle being a starting point for the gold rush. I know that there was tons of people heading to Alaska from all over the world, so it was a diverse place, even then. And so there might have been a whole lineup of characters. Maybe you had a whole animal kingdom of different characters, and this is just one of many. But so many questions. That's what I love about doing this podcast, though, is that we don't immediately turn to the Google solution box. We try to figure it out on our own, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Of
course. Thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me on. I hope we can do another longer form episode at another time.
We will. I know it. Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.